Hi, everyone, and welcome to 50 Now What? I'm your host, Alicia Sutton. Today, I sit down with Kyomi O'Connor, author of A Sky of Infinite Blue, a Japanese immigrant's search for home and self. In today's episode, Kyomi graciously shares the emotional challenges from her childhood and family in Japan and her subsequent journey to the United States to find a way to start over for herself. While working as a researcher living out of a tiny apartment in Bethesda, Maryland, she met her future husband, Patrick, a British cancer researcher who was instrumental in holding space for her to begin to heal her generational trauma and what it means to feel loved. Their journey together led to San Diego, California, where the two adopted the practice of Buddhism and a commitment to helping others. Unfortunately, Patrick had his own journey with brain cancer and passed away after a 3-year battle in 2016. Kyomi was able to break through her grief through writing, which led to the incredible A Sky of Infinite Blue, which began to bring meaning back into her life. Kyomi's story is authentic, raw, and shared in hopes to show that there is always a way to make it to the other side of grief and hard times if you keep digging. Let's jump into it. Hi, Kyomi. How are you?
Good. How are you, Alicia? It's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's good to have you here, and I've been so excited to talk to you. We have so much. You've lived such a dynamic life and had such broad experience. We could go anywhere with this conversation, but before we get started and jump into it, so much we can talk about. But why don't we start with you telling us about your childhood and growing up in Japan and what that was like and those early childhood experiences and some emotional trauma that impacted you.
Yes. I was born and raised in Japan, and I was a middle child, 3 daughters my parents had. So since my preschool ages, 3.5 years old, my father and then paternal family started to, emotionally abuse, like a verbal abuse. And then that exact same type of abuse was given to my mother. And I was kind of categorized as a mother's child. And my elder sister, she's the eldest. So eldest sister was categorized as a father's child. And then appreciated no matter what she does. And then I was totally like a speck of dust. So that treatment lasted a very long time, but at the beginning, I didn't understand what happened. And then, I thought, oh, maybe accidentally they forgot about me, or giving a gift a totally different level of quality. And my sister get really fantastic, like a Barbie doll, and I get something like a small and then insignificant. So that's every time it repeated, and I thought, oh, something must be wrong with me. And then I didn't understand why they didn't like me. And then I tried to please them, but part of me is kind of stubborn, and I never cried. So probably that upset them too. So they wanted me to suffer. But I kind of set up my protective armor, started to wear the protective armor in a very early age. So I always pretended I am okay. And then, even they did, pretty harsh cold treatment. I was like laughing, and then I pretended I didn't notice anything. So I never cried in front of them.
Wow. And as a child, that's a lot to carry, to build an armor like that at such a young age and to get withdrawn and to not cry. There had to have been some, and you talked about before, some other impacts that has to have. Even as adults, when you hold things in so long, they start to have even some physical ramifications on you. Did you start to feel that as a child, anxiety and things like that?
Yeah. So when I was an elementary student, I was always selected as a class president, or, I was doing pretty well. I was very empathetic to the people, like a classmate who are bullied. And I tried to even protect the victim of bullies. And then they started to bully me back, even including the victim I was protecting. So that kind of experience was really hard on me. And then even I was juggling two different phases of my lifestyle, like being wearing armor, and also I was deeply hurt. And then so as an elementary student, I go to the school, but before going to school, I have a really anxiety attack, and then I have to stop walking to go in school, and then like almost a deep breath, and then my stomach was almost coming out of mouth, and then that experience. So I didn't know what's wrong with me or why they treat me like this, and then I started to build like a shame and guilt instead of blaming other people bad. I couldn't say anything bad, and then I am the one taking up everything inwardly, basically hurting myself by myself.
Wow. And it led to growing up with that kind of, because, and you talked about this before about having that armor and somehow, because, when you put armor on, it's actually an added weight. You know what I mean? So I like that analogy. It's like, yeah, I'm protecting myself, but I'm actually adding more onto you. And as a young child, that's so hard to do. And so I can see how it would trigger this kind of, basically you had an anxiety attack and you were a child having an anxiety attack, holding onto that fence and trying not to throw up as you grew up. Because how old were you when that started happening? You were really young, like a school age, maybe 8 or 9?
Yeah.
A little girl. You were a little girl.
Abuse itself started even before I went to kindergarten, like a preschool. So like a 3.5 to 4-year-old. And then I was very clear already when I was like a first grade, like a 6 or 7-year-old at the elementary. I knew I was juggling two different, like a duality of life, like a very bright, bouncing around, a good, smart girl, bothers deeply hurt.
Yeah, but deeply hurt. Yeah, just covering it all up. And so as you grew up, obviously this armor became, is it fair to say it became heavier or became thicker, or did it become weaker?
Yeah, it became thicker and thicker, and I didn't know what to do. Like I was trapped in a cage, and I know my original personality is more open, and then so happy child originally, but unhappy child I have to carry all the time, and then that heaviness was always there in my life, and then my family wasn't really a simple happy family. My father was a professor at the university, but he has quite a number of infidelity problems, and then so that shadowed our family dynamics. And then my mother was always keep complaining and crying, and I was a protector and a warrior for my mother. And then in our household, 3 daughters, I was the only one acting like warrior.
Oh,
So
wow.
the time, when I became a teenage, I was already listen to my mother's complaint all the time, and so that made even on top of original childhood emotional abuse, my mother's complaint made even complex PTSD. I was suffering complex PTSD because my mother is one always reciting the same problem every single day. So when I was a teenager, I had a huge argument with my father. Talking back to my father was totally taboo in our culture. Asian culture, father is the head of a household, and then I am a daughter and a middle daughter, and then talking back, and it actually argument went really completely separating our family because my father had an affair and then another child outside of their marriage. So I was the first person to speak out against my father, but I took it very deeply to hurt myself, because I had a already habit of everything become my fault. So even talking back, that was pretty normal to do and then should be done. But my mentality and the habit of criticizing myself, become much harder to myself.
And do you think this argument with your dad, because it sounds like through your childhood and through your childhood development, this relationship with your father, which we'll get into more, definitely impacted every other area of your life, especially when it comes to love and intimacy and things like that. But this
Oh, definitely.
definitely, but this final straw, I mean, as a teenager, would you say that is that where some of your armor started? Because you talked about the armor and the barrier at some point eventually starting to crumble or started to wane. Is this kind of one of those pivotal points where that armor was starting to to wear out because you're trying to break out of it? I mean, to take on your dad, which is culturally, in most cultures, is really, for a young woman to take a stand against her father, says a lot about, first of all, who you are as a person in any way. I mean, you were the warrior right there. How did that change the dynamics?
Right. So the argument was originally started to discuss my future career, like the choice of university. I wanted to become a journalist. And my father always long thought that I should become a medical doctor. And then, but somehow the relatives, one of the relatives brought some possibility to support one of our sisters to become a dentist, because, my mother's side of the family has a long family kind of a business being a dentist. So somehow a great uncle brought some story, and then so eventually that we had an argument, and then that shifted. I gave away my career choice to dentistry. So abandoned my own wish, and I felt I betrayed myself. And all of the stuff brought together to eventually I was suffering so going downward so hard. And eventually I attempted suicide in the early 20s.
Wow. And I know you've talked about that very openly, and I don't want to talk about that at this point. And that is during that moment just before. I know that you basically were given the option to dentistry or to follow your dream. And at the end of the day, it came down to cost. It was going to come down to who was going to pay for your education. But having relinquished your dream at that point, and you describe it in much detail, those moments leading up to your attempted suicide, there was a moment where you felt like something was stopping you from it. And you described it as basically an attempt that you failed, but there was something else that stopped you from doing it. What was that moment like to get to that point and go, okay, yeah, this is not going to work? And you pulled yourself because you tried to slit your wrist, correct?
Yes, right. So, this trauma, I thought about my father is really the cause of a problem. But again, I mentioned about my mother. That she was also causing, complex PTSD to me too. So when I was still at the dental school, I was like a state of depression, and my mother was very selfish in a way. And then she came to my apartment, and then I was really like a edge of breaking down. But she didn't see me that way. And then she insisted to talk with her and having a tea with her. And then, but I was about to go to the class, and then so I excused. But and then she was complaining about my behavior to then estrange my father. And then my father said, Kyomi is dead. And then my mother was I think she was quite stupid, actually. And then she relayed that my father's word multiple times, calling me, and then to protect her love and then her, her pride. So she was blind to my own problem, but she just making things much worse. And then she repeated, I'm dead, a few times. And then that triggered me. This is it. How long I've been protecting my mother for a long time since my childhood. And then that was a breaking point. I really, I couldn't find the value and the meaning of my life at the moment.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. And this was because when your mom came to you, it was because you were at school at the time, and she came to the school to have this conversation with you. And when she told you that your father had basically said that, Kyomi is dead, did you believe that that's something that your father had said? Did you kind of go, yeah, this is what it all culminated?
At that moment, I wasn't logical enough any longer because I was already taking up all of the duties and responsibilities and then being the warriors. And I was too tired to continue. And then so no matter what they said, what they believe, I was already done. I did so, since 3.5 year old to that moment, like a 22-year-old, I carried that heavy armor too long time. And I just wanted to let it go. So to let it go, because I was like having that duality. And I was a top student, even at the university. And then, to having that totally polarized the life. And then I was totally lonely and empty. So if they still insisted for me to behave, I am already done. I have nothing to give. That's how I felt.
You were empty. You were depleted. And that speaks a lot. When people get to that point, that's usually where they are. It's like that's it. There's no place else for you to go. I have a question. Do you think that when we talk about the cultural dynamics growing up in Japan, do you think that a lot of that was culturally because of your birth order? Because your younger sister wasn't treated that way. Was it because of the birth order and because you were a girl?
Oh, yes, I'm pretty sure. My elder sister was 2 years older than me, and the younger one was 5 years younger. So 5 years younger is always just a little one, and then, very special. But I was very, my age was close to my elder sister, and then I was very capable child. And my elder sister was totally different from me. And she believes she deserves everything at that time. She's already different person now, but back then she was always sitting on the throne. She deserved everything. And then I was like a servant.
The stubborn stepchild, the stubborn Kyomi was the warrior. They saw it. She was going to be a problem. How do we stamp this out? But fortunately for you and for the world, actually, your suicide attempt was not a success. And you pulled yourself out of this tub feeling like, okay, I failed this attempt, but yet something else touched you during those moments. You dragged yourself out of that tub. You were going to live at that point. You didn't attempt another suicide. Was that where you think you maybe started to try to heal your trauma? Or was there some other things there are other things that happened after that. Obviously, someone, I'll let you tell the story, but someone found out where you were. They found out where you were, and they came to find you. And let's talk a little bit about that.
Yes. So after totally depleted the moment, I was frozen and I was shivering and I was frozen, but I couldn't really complete my task, that of suicide. So I felt something was like helping me to live. That's like a strange feeling. I mean, like something bigger than me wanted me to live and then see the life in the future. So even just coming out of that state took several hours. I couldn't even move or anything like that. But then I thought, what to do? I couldn't continue the way I used to. So I thought, okay, I should go to Nara. Nara is like a 1 hour by train from Kyoto. It's very rusty, very ancient, very primordial. It's a warm feeling. I always enjoy being there in Nara. So I thought I should go to Nara. And then maybe not now, but someday in the future, I can bring out my courage to do writing, like a journalism or whatever. I just had a little hope that moment. And then I was in Nara, and then I brought my college together to call one of the friend, but she was actually the associate professor at the university at that moment. But I trusted her as one of the best friend. But of course, she's a professor, and she has a reason to, save my life. So, one of the student is about, dying or came from a suicidal attempt. And so she thought probably she needs to be brought back to where I was. So even I do think, something else maybe, but it needs to be bring back, not in Nara. So, and then my sister and then boyfriend got information from her or my father. I don't know exactly what happened, but my father shared that information too. So they drove overnight and then came to the hotel somehow. But I couldn't put myself together. I didn't know what's happening. And I wasn't even sure what I was because I was totally lost and then like a vacant. And then somewhere in Nara, I was staying at the hotel, and then like somebody knocked the door, and then like as I opened, that was my sister, elder sister, and then my boyfriend. And then at that moment, everything was like totally shattered again. All of the stress and then pressure from the suicide or whatever. People probably don't understand how could I, but I felt I was, going back to the captivity. That's how I felt. Yeah.
Back to the life you were trying to escape by running and escape by trying to commit suicide. Somehow you're pulled back into it. But you managed to make it work. You managed to go back into that life and start living it as if you were. And you ended up with your boyfriend, and you guys lived together for a period of time.
And then eventually married.
And married and finished up school.
Yeah. But I was still as I was, that the time of suicide. I wasn't healed. I was pretending with a little broken armor, but thicker armor still wearing. So I was basically mentally ill, but I pretended not to. And then, so I still on my life, and then living with the boyfriend, and then become my first husband. But I wasn't happy.
Mm-hmm. Do you think he knew that you weren't happy, or do you think he knew you were happy, or did he just feel like he was doing his duty as a husband, or at least trying?
I think he loved me very much, and he knew I was, I attempted suicide, but somehow he was holding that fact as me as a kind of, captive. Yeah, he was controlling that, using that fact. I wouldn't go away because he's putting that rope.
He had the strings, basically. You were weak, and he was holding you there because he knew your secret, so to speak. He knew your secret that you committed suicide, yeah, or tried to.
He never asked me why or how I am doing, since never asked. So that's how our relationship was. I wasn't myself. I wasn't open to even the wound to see how I was. And then he didn't share the moment.
And I find that amazing that no one would ask, like, what's causing this? What's happening with this? I find that amazing. And I think that that enables someone who is already you were clearly in a despondent mental state. You were just high functioning in a state of mental illness and depression and so many other things. And I think that was just what amazed me, that no one even inquired to ask, but you knew that this was happening to yourself. And so after that, though, things change. And I always believe that somehow there's always a shift. There's always a place where things are meant to kind of go their separate ways. And so that's what eventually happened with you and your husband. Opportunities came available to him, and a completely separate opportunities came available to you. And it caused you to have to make a choice as to what you were going to do with your life. You were forced to really make a hard choice about your life. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So my first husband had an opportunity to become kind of a professor, like a promoted. And that was very distant, different university. And then at that time, I told him I wouldn't go. I can't go. So that was really clearly, I knew this marriage is not good. And I have to make a decision some point. I knew it. And then soon later, I got invitation from NIH, National Institute of Health in Bethesda, Maryland, working as a postdoctoral researcher there. So that moment, opportunity arrived, and then I had known our marriage was, to me, fake. And then so I have to make a decision to just let it go. So I told him, my husband, then I would go. And then he wanted the marriage still keep on going, because the original NIH contract was for 2 years for international researcher to reside, like 2 years. So, but somehow in my mind, it's over. And then I didn't think I'm coming back to Japan. I knew. So that's why, to me, it's no sense to keep marriage still ongoing, even longer separation or like a longer distance, separation for another 2 years, or maybe becoming 5 years, or it doesn't make sense. I have to draw the line.
You drew the line. You knew it was your out. It was your out. You had to go. You had to go. And so you end up in Bethesda, Maryland, in the U.S. A young woman from Japan. You didn't know anybody except you just knew you were going to be working at this place, and you land here. What does it feel like? Did you feel like I'm free, or did you feel like, okay, now my life starts? What does it feel like?
Everything was so new. And then I was totally like a whiteboard, like a blank page. So when I left Japan, the time airplane was like ascending. I love that feeling, like ascending. I felt all of the pressure, gravity over me. And then that departure was the moment that I felt I was totally in tears, full of tears, but also I had a huge hope, like expanding in my heart. And I couldn't stop it. And I didn't know why I was crying. I was crying for the past, but I was crying for the future, unknown future I am unfolding. So that's how I started. And then when I came to States, of course, my English still, I'm not really a great speaker, but my English was totally, I was much shyer than now. So anyhow, everything was so new, and then I have to start everything from scratch. I came to the States with 2 suitcases, nothing else. But I was hoping, but also I was a little bit afraid, but still I had a courage to walk.
The courage to walk. And so you're on the NIH campus, which is huge, and you're on this campus and you're learning, you're meeting new friends. And you end up at this, because you were in a small little studio apartment at first that they kind of set up for you. And then, of course, you said, and I have to mention the book. I know you're not here to sell the book, but I read the book, and I would be remiss not to mention A Sky of Infinite Blue. Japanese Immigrant's Search for Home and Self was just phenomenal. And I have to mention it. I can't get away from it because it was so good. But you end up in this little apartment, but you mentioned in your heart you knew you weren't even supposed to stay there that long. You knew that you were going to be leaving there. You were going to be finding someplace else, which landed you to the next phase of your life. Let's talk about that. How you end up leaving that little studio apartment for a place where,
Yeah.
in Bethesda of all
Yeah.
places.
Yes. Before I left Japan, I had a conversation with my future supervisor. And then I requested just only for 2 months. I wanted a furnished apartment to just get used to, and then just put the feet in a new place. So I had a walking distance, like a 20 minutes walk, studio apartment, and then furnished. And then so with 2 suitcases, and then I started life. But I hoped, even at that time, 2 months contract after the lease is over, I am starting the new life with American people, sharing with American. That's how I hoped. So even like just passing, I came to the States February 1990. So it was already winter, in the middle of winter. I started to walk around and then finding another candidate to share the house or apartment or whatever. And then so I walk around the 22 candidate from Fogarty's, recommendation. Fogarty is the one, the NIH has a international researcher to help, lots of domestic stuff, how home-related stuff. So one of them, housing. So I got like a 22 housing examples and then visited, but none of them I didn't like it. And then the 23rd, I went to just behind Naval Hospital. Presidents are always going there. So, but behind Naval Hospital, about 20 minutes walking distance after yoga. Yoga I was taking at the NIH with one of the short-term visiting professor, female Japanese visitor. She was also taking yoga with me. So she drove me to the house. She offered the ride to meet the 23rd new home, candidate. And then I got there, but my friend was very sort of
I love this story.
aggressive, like sort of aggressive, I don't know. She represented me, and she is the one the first talking to the person. The person was the man, a young man, and in like shorts and jogging shoes, and then he just obviously came from the gymnasium, but I couldn't even see because she was blocking me behind the door, and she's the one keep talking, but eventually he asked if she is Kyomi, and she said, "Oh no, Kyomi is here behind me," like a boom, and then she opened the door, and then the guy was like, "Oh, you are Kyomi." So that was the first time I met husband to be Patrick. He was also working at NIH, cancer researcher from England.
I love that. I love that story. I just love it. And for the record, I probably, if that had been me and you, I probably would have been the one blocking the door because I tend to be that way about people I'm protective of. So she's right here. I need to see what's going on behind this door before I let her in. Don't trust you. But in any way, I thought that was so adorable. And I love the way you put that in the book. But then starts you move into the house. You decide to move into the house, and Patrick's there, and it is quite the love story after that.
Yes, Patrick was a tenant. He was renting the room in the basement, my room was a second floor, and then it was full of sun, and then beautiful oak tree is right next to the window, and then I loved it. And then the owner just painted the wall in a, like a egg yellow or something like a yolk yellow, and it's so cute. And I loved it. But I moved in end of March, and then my owner, the house owner, American MD, and then wife was Finnish from Finland. She was educated in the States, but she was working in a elementary special children's education. So anyhow, they went to Finland summertime, long vacation because she was a teacher. So they went to Finland about 1.5 months. They are gone, and then that time Patrick and I became very close. But behind this situation, Patrick already had known me even before I visited the house. He shared it later on. So basically, he had a very special spiritual ability to see or the dream what's going to happen in the future. And he already knew the Asian woman comes to the house and then she will become his girlfriend and the wife. So that's why he had a little vision already set in his mind. So he was moving toward that goal, I guess.
He knew it was coming.
So,
He knew you were coming.
yes.
And so over time, that relationship, do you feel like it started to, in his premonition, obviously, that you were coming there, was part of your healing and part of your growing into who you are right now?
Yeah. Yes. So he was totally different to me because in my whole life in Japan and up to the point, I was lacking the sense of being loved. So he is the first person really don't hesitate to show me what means to be loved. So I really appreciate it. I loved him, and then he loved me too. So he had an unconditional love, very fine tuned, very kind, empathetic person. He never really asked me what happened. And he didn't tell me what happened in his life either. But slowly, from here and there, get to know and then what happened. But we didn't have to discuss what happened and then what is next. But in a way, he is slowly introducing me to being loved.
I love that. Oh, wow. That's so phenomenal. And it's that growth and that learning to love yourself and to be accepting of love that led you to, in many ways, and I found this absolutely so wonderful, is a reconciliation of sorts actually with your father and your family. It came full circle. And it was, let's talk a little bit about that. Eventually, this love, this person coming into your life allowed you to open and blossom and embrace.
Yes. And then after I moved to States, I have to go through everything from the scratch in a practical sense. And then Patrick was in my life already. So I had some kind of an anchor in my heart, but still I am dealing with practicality day by day. And then, I have so many challenges as an immigrant woman, but I take all of the responsibility and then doing not perfectly, but the best in the practical sense. And then I became so resilient and then more confident woman. And then so my husband, Patrick love, and also the life in the States changed me, transformed me into who I am originally. So I was ready to challenge myself too. So I wanted to change my career because back in Japan, number one, I prohibited my career from being regular dentist to kind of like a collect money, the money orientated private practitioner. That's I try to avoid. So that's why I advanced myself into the basic research to do like, that, which brought me to States. That's a wonderful thing. So, but dentistry was always a part of me. And I always loved serving people who has a more challenge, children or elderly. That's how I loved my dental practice. So and then in the States, I was doing only research. So that felt, I was lacking something, my serving desire to serve people. So, and then early 94, I realized when I was reading the book, Seven Habits of Effective People,
Stephen Covey, yeah.
by Stephen Covey. Yes, I got like a total kind of shock. And I have to change my career to serve people. That's how I felt. So, and it took over 1 year to even discuss with Patrick and then, speaking the practical terms. And then, but at that moment, we didn't have enough money to carry out our lifestyle. Of course, I can borrow, student loan or whatever, but the just half of, income is not good enough. And then I decided to borrow money just for 2 years while I'm doing the education, dental education. So that's how I felt. Maybe I can speak with my father. That was a total shock to me. That idea itself is the last thing I used to even imagine. But now it come out to my surface of my heart. And then that's how I was already ready to accept the past and my father. And then that shocked me. But that's the beginning of like a blossoming the relationship. And then unfortunately, the end of 2 years, after he sent me the last month of allowance for us, I thought that I was just borrowing money, but he said basically he has a terminal illness and he's gonna die. And then he left one of the most difficult wish for my family to face. So, but that challenge I took, and then I just wanted to reconcile a whole family with my father, even regardless of this challenge.
Right. And to call it a challenge is, again, in reading the book, I mean, it was it was quite the challenge to be asked, basically, if you don't mind, I will just paraphrase, basically to bring your family together. At that point, your dad had remarried someone, but technically couldn't because he was still married to your mom. So it was left upon you then to resolve this situation toward the end of his life while he was actually passing away. And you did it. You did it in such a profoundly kind and generous way. I don't know. Well, I'll let you speak about it but you found it in you to have the resolve to do that. And at the end of the day, it came down to forgiveness.
Yes. The things are very complicated because estranged almost decades. That father was dying. It was a, difficult situation for the whole family, but he brought the new, most difficult, challenging task to me. That was basically asking my mother to divorce to make him available to get married to somebody else, very new person. The person was like came out into his picture just only several months. And then so,
Several months before he was diagnosed, right?
yes. So then my father left us when I was still teenage. And then left for a new woman who has a child with my father. And then that relationship lasted only 10 years. And but he has to pay for the daughter. He has a daughter with her. So and then but he had a few times asked my mother to reconcile and then to take him back to home, our house. But my mother rejected a few times. So my father was basically, being estranged for 2 decades before that happens. And then so my mother and my two sisters are almost like having very negative, almost like a hatred toward my father. And but for me, I left the country and then I transformed myself in the States, and I was earning a happy life. So in a way, my two sisters, my mother, want to really totally happy because they know father exists in Japan, and but they felt guilty too because they are the one rejecting my father. So, but when my father became terminally ill, I had an urge to make this situation harmonious. But he brought the new woman into the picture, and then my mother has to divorce my father. Of course, just to think about, whatever my father has as an inheritance, it could be my mother's money, right? But now, after 2 decades of suffering, she has to give up for a new woman who was just met several months ago. So, so that task was so big. But
That's a lot.
I have to, yeah, I know, but I have to let my father pass, no matter what happens with like a practicality. But that's his wish. I wanted fulfill his wish, and then toward that goal, that I go back and forth with my sisters, and then but somehow I knew my mother would be very forgiving. So, but eventually we, the last 1.5 months before my father passed away, my sisters, my mother, everybody were pretty happy to send my father to the next realm. So, that was a very fortunate situation. Yeah.
That is very fortunate to read. And it also, did you feel like, I just want to know how you felt about it at the end of that, kind of that release. Did you feel like the final weight had been lifted with so much? Or I just can't imagine, just like something being so healed within you.
Yes, I didn't know what he was really giving to me back then, but my father left me a teaching, Buddhist teaching. I think somehow that even like influence. I wasn't a member yet, but he left a teaching for me to pursue. So, but I had no doubt I will do it. So, but anyhow, somehow the magical, mysterious power may be already affecting us all. So I could only see the beginning and then future. Even my father's life is ending, but I felt we have a greater future, and he is part of it. Even he is looking over us. I could believe it.
I love that. I love that so much. I absolutely love that. And so moving forward, your life you still had some things ahead of you that you didn't see coming. And somehow this healing, this rebirth, is that fair to say? Almost like a rebirth. And you can correct me if that's not how you feel about it, but ended up serving you even more, like you said, in the future, the new life that was ahead of you, when you had to deal with Patrick's diagnosis, his illness, and eventual passing. Let's talk a little bit about that.
So after my father passed, basically Patrick and I decided to move to San Diego. So for him to start a new career. I was already pediatric dentist by that time, but my husband Patrick was pretty conservative. So he was still working at NIH end of 1997, but finally he decided to take a step forward to work in a pharmaceutical company. So we moved to San Diego, and then so in San Diego, I was already in contact with the Buddhist teaching group, and then I found that the temple, nearest temple, was like 1.5 hours drive. So Patrick and I, we both are, as a professional, it's very busy life. I started to work in an Indian reservation as a pediatric dentist. And my husband was working for the local, San Diego local middle-sized pharmaceutical company. And he was working for cancer drug research and development. So we both are very busy individuals, but we drove back and forth to the temple, and then we both started work, not just only daily life become like a transforming into the more spiritual life. We have a, regardless of the hectic professional life, but still we are able to even change our lifestyle in a more serene and then meaningful spiritual life. So we had a great relationship. However, 2013, June 14th, he went to MRI because he suffered almost for 2 years of a severe headache, and then I was so concerned about it. And then the symptom become more and more concerning. And then I set up like an expedited MRI for him. And then he went there. After MRI exam, he couldn't even walk. So 2013, within a month or so, he got diagnosis about metastatic melanoma in the brain. And it started so critical and then drastic and then change our life from the like a top tier to like a bottom of a bottom. And I couldn't understand how bottom become deeper and deeper and deeper as he is in progress. That was extremely difficult, the roller coaster ride all the time.
But you managed. Somehow your spirits, somehow everything that you'd learned from a little girl, all the armor that you had built up, broke down, and replenished, got you through the other side. And it is something very deeply profound about being with someone at their bedside when they pass away. And I know what that feeling is too. I was at my mom's bedside when she passed away, and it is and I don't mean that to, at all draw comparison to this, but I think that was one of the things that was so many things that resonated with me about your story was this, and how you are able to get through and have a profound spiritual experience in the midst of grief and sorrow. All that to say, you still ended up finding meaning through that. How did we get to that? How did we get to, I know it's a long process. It's not linear, but making it through to the other side. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yes. I had a very difficult 3 years of caregiving for him. original prognosis he had was a few months. So, but with my care and devotion, and also, advancement of medicine, he survived additional 3 years. But at the end of 3 years, I wasn't really sure. Actually, toward the end of 3 years, I wasn't really sure I was doing right thing. He could have been dead a long time ago. Particularly, his suffering was coming from a brain. And then eventually, the cancer wasn't the one killed him, but all of the intervention and then the radiation therapy and chemotherapy, immunotherapy, all of the assault, I could say, assault to brain is the one that liquidated brain. So he was broken in pieces day by day. And I have to observe that too. That witnessing that, I have a great empathy for the people, who has to look the family member, the loved ones, Alzheimer or the dementia or anything, brain disease do for us. It's so painful to even watch. So, but toward the end of 3 years, I was almost becoming pieces. But after he passed, I noticed basically I have to survive. So I have to drag very old piece of armor, protective armor, wearing, and then get through that very difficult, harsh, critical 3 years. So that realization came when I was in very deep grief. The first grief, as Alicia also experienced. I mean, the first phase is totally, you have no capacity to feel, no receptor to feel. It's totally shut down. Any pain, any emotion, nothing is you can even pick up. So that's how you progress into the deeper and deeper grief. And in the deeper grief, I realized I was pretending I was okay, to the people, even the spiritual group. I was pretending I am okay, but I wasn't okay. As soon as I went back home and then become alone, I was crashing into the pieces and I couldn't find myself, how I can put myself together. That period of time passed. And then how long I have to keep myself in this miserable duality of life all the time? Why I am pretending? Why I can't be just, showing up as a tearful person? And then I realized the duality I was doing in the childhood. And then when I read one of the article, the teaching in the teaching publication, it said, just to be yourself as you are. It's okay. If you want to cry, cry. That simple passage made me really like almost my tear was like a waterfall. And then I felt like a envelope, like an embrace. And then that's the moment I decided to write, like 9 months after my husband passing. And then I started to write, and then I started to see even residual childhood, the trauma still unhealed. So that part, I go back and forth, childhood, and then now the grieving, this, death, and then all of the stuff, I have to visit so many places in the past,
Right.
and then started to dig. And at the beginning, it wasn't really deep enough. It was like still I was protecting myself because I wasn't really sure I can go deeper. I was so vulnerable. But then when I realized this may help some other people sometime in the future, and then start to feel maybe I should write for other people, not for myself. And then started to dig even deeper and deeper. And then that part become my spiritual practice. Otherwise, I couldn't dig deeper. So, and then dig deeper, deeper, deeper. And then I saw the pile of rubble. But in the rubble, I started to see twinkling, kind of a sparkling light here and there. Small, tiny light is kind of almost like evaporating. And I thought, oh my God, I lived my life honestly and then try to be truthful as possible. That light is in me.
Yes. Yes. That's the part. That's where I wanted us to get to. That's it. You have to keep digging till you get to the light. Ah, you made it to the light. And everything just seems to come full circle. You just have to keep digging.
Yeah. Digging takes your courage and the tear and the blood and the pain, but it's all worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. That's where I wanted us to get to. Oh, wow. I absolutely love it. And oh, wow. I could almost just leave it right there. I'm going to give you a moment to, if you have any other final words for us. I love to give people a chance for words of wisdom, but this whole conversation have been words of wisdom. But if you had any other, because eventually you did write the book and you're still doing such good work, still digging to give us the light that you have within you. What else would you like to share with our audience? Some final words of wisdom.
Yes. I consider my book is a love story. And then everyone has a own love story. But you have to gather courage to write your own story. You are the one creator of your own love story. So that love story needs to be hard. So you have a courage and love in yourself. You can do this.
And that is it. I'm going to leave it right there. Thank you so much, Kyomi.
Thank you, Alicia.
Oh, we're so grateful to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to 50 Now What? A special thanks to my guest, Kyomi. Make sure to pick up A Sky of Infinite Blue wherever books are sold. Make sure to follow us, rate, and share the show. Make sure to follow me on Instagram for continuous updates at 50 Now What Podcast. That's 50 Now What Podcast. This podcast was produced by Rainbow Creative with Matthew Jones as senior producer, Stephen Selnick as producer, and Rob Johnson as editor and audio engineer. I love working with this team. To learn more about making a podcast for you or your business, visit them at rainbowcreative.co.